Your hosts are The Great Order and No White Guilt. And this is the after party. The crown winner of last week is McDozer, financially gifting $25. Thank you so much, McDozer. We really appreciate that. In second place was JK160. Thank you so very much, financially gifting $10. Thank you so very much as well. Folks, you can financially gift here on Entropy, which will be up in just one moment. Remember, that is a cost of 15% to you, but it goes to the wonderful people at Entropy who keep freedom of speech alive. You can also vote and ask questions over there on Entropy. Or you may financially gift on Cash App. You will find the URLs down there in the description. Cash App is zero cost to you. Jared and I always evenly share the financial gifts with our guest on the after party. And today we have the one and only, a brand new mother with a beautiful baby, Jill Colton, on tap with us. Jill, please introduce yourself to our esteemed community. Tell them where they can find you. And then Mr. George will take us into the conversation.
Hi, I'm Jill. Thanks for having me, guys. You can find me on Twitter at Jill Colton Free. I also have a YouTube channel, Jill Colton. I haven't posted to my YouTube in a while because they were censoring me so hard, but I think I'm going to start again. I'm a former mainstream media broadcaster. I quit because it was so unethical, and then I started doing YouTube, and then I really started my family. I have 2 young sons, and I'm married, and I no longer live in the city of Toronto, which is hell. From Ontario, Canada.
Well, thank you for being here, Jill. And well, we definitely want to hear about what woke you up. Why don't we start with just tell us anything and everything about what you saw when you were studying journalism, what the schooling was like, and then when you were in the profession, and eventually how that led you to the views you have now and kind of seeing things more clearly.
Sure. So I went to the University of Toronto, which is very liberal now. I'm sure it was liberal when I went there as well. I didn't think it was as bad because I'm older. I just turned 40 years old. So I don't think it was as bad when I was going to school. And I also went to journalism school at Seneca College. So I did a lot of schooling to become a journalist that made no money. But, you know, it was something happened, I would say, probably around 2010 where things really started to change. It became very liberalized. More so, they really didn't have a lot of conservatives working in journalism any longer. So I certainly don't want to say that my experience in university is anything like what they're experiencing now, which seems crazy. It seems like total Marxist indoctrination. Mine was okay. I was always conservative. So any sort of programming didn't really work on me for whatever reason. I don't know why, it just didn't. And I worked in the field of journalism sort of as an undercover conservative. I never really talked about my political views too much until the election of Donald Trump. So leading into, I would say 2015, 2016 is really when I decided to become more political at work. Of course, I knew that that was going to destroy my career. But at that point, I'd had enough, and I figured it was too unethical to work in journalism at that point anyway.
Are you at liberty, Jill, to say where you worked?
Sure. Yeah. I worked at CP24 in Toronto, which everybody knows. I worked at CTV Toronto. I worked at Canada AM. I worked in CTV Sudbury. I worked at CFRB Radio. I was all over it. I did everything. I was a producer. I was a writer. I was a reporter and anchor, but I was specifically known as being a morning show host and a weather broadcaster. So I chose weather specifically. I didn't want to be a hard news reporter because I like the likability factor of weather more so. So I'd rather be personality driven than doing hard news. And plus I don't really even do, you know, the kind of news that I wanted to do anyway. I mean, being a hard news reporter nowadays means covering like a breast cancer run. You know, it's not really actual news. When I decided that I wanted to leave, I was like, okay, I'm going to set up a YouTube channel. I'm going to cover actual stories now without that liberal slant. And yeah, my YouTube channel did really well until they started throttling it. The censorship became insane. I'm sure you guys know all about that.
Oh yeah.
Over 15,000 subscribers, and they wouldn't let me get past that point. And then they started going into my account and deleting my videos, especially when coronavirus happened. They just went in and deleted all my videos on Bill Gates, accused me of being a conspiracy theorist. And by the way, everything I said in those videos was true and has come to fruition. So, you know.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just really quickly, because you went to university. I just don't want to hop over this too quickly, and then we keep rolling quickly, though, because we want to get as much out of Jill as we can. It's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much, especially brand new mother and mother of a 4 or 3-year-old as well. So that's wonderful. When you went to university, were you already patriotic? Were you already conservative? And then you were already a nerd against what they were trying to force down, brainwash you with? Or did you become more hardened in your conservatism? Or what exactly was that like?
Okay, so I was never overtly political when I was 19 going to university. I had voted in one election and I had voted conservative. But no, I'd say that my mind was really open to politics and religion. I was not that educated in both subjects when I went to university, so I would have been primed for the picking. I would have been the perfect candidate for that Marxist indoctrination. I mean, it was there. I don't think it was overt to the degree that it is now. But everything was, I tell my husband all the time, the main thing that we used to talk about was biological determinism versus social constructionism. So professors always wanted you to buy into this concept of social constructionism, to believe that your genetics has nothing to do with your behavior. And so that was really what I got out of it. And I just remember thinking to myself, how can you dismiss your genetics and your DNA? How can this not be a factor in your behavior? And I remember not buying into this concept specifically for this reason. So I don't think they were able to indoctrinate me because I just didn't believe a lot of it. I just thought it was silly.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my husband was just coming down.
No, it's all right. Like we said, if babies have to appear on camera, it happens all the time here. And
he's only 7 weeks old, so
I think some people might want to see him if that's okay. But that's up to you. That's up to you. As often happens, Jason and I were on the same page. I was about to ask you a very, very similar question. Part of it you already answered. But as a corollary or an addendum to the kind of question Jason asked, we get this a lot. We've heard this a lot from people who work in the arts, especially. I experienced it myself. Did you experience anything where, even though you weren't, as no one would be when you're entering at 19 years old, you weren't as articulate or solid in your views as you are now, of course, that it's almost more of a type, an instinct that you had, and that other people who did go all in for the anti-white indoctrination and that whole thing could kind of smell it on you? Like, was there kind of I'm interested in the subtle social cues with all of that.
That's true. I didn't really discover that, though, until I interviewed, funny enough, with the CBC. And I don't know if if you know, the CBC is the taxpayer-funded Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Okay, right. So it's completely government. It's Marxist. It's communist. It's the equivalent of the BBC in the United Kingdom. It's really bad. And at the time, again, like, I wasn't super political, even in journalism school. I really wasn't. So I interviewed with them 3 separate occasions. I can't believe that I'm even admitting that. People would be like, are you kidding me? It's so evil. Why would you want to work for them? I didn't recognize it at the time. I was naive. And it was funny because all 3 interviews, I got the sense after I had interviewed that I was dismissed immediately. For whatever reason, I couldn't figure it out. I was like, you know what? I have the top tier education. I have tons of experience, but I don't seem to be the type of person that they want in this organization. And I couldn't figure it out. And it's only now, looking back, I go, wow, they knew I was conservative before I even did.
I know it might be tough. It was years ago, but do you remember maybe certain questions or ways they were prodding to find that out?
Yeah, I think that they didn't believe me that I had gone to the University of Toronto. I think that I was like, not that I think, that I'm, so attractive or whatever, but like, we all know liberal women aren't exactly, lookers. And so I think they dismissed me right away. They didn't believe me. They were like, nah, you don't look the type. You don't look like a liberal. And I honestly think that's what it was. Yeah.
It's funny for people.
I'm sorry, you can pick people out of a lineup. You really can nowadays. You know exactly what their political affiliations are based on how they look for the most part.
Which is very interesting given what you said in the beginning, because these are people who are denying, neither Jason nor I only see the world in material terms, certainly, and see things in spiritual terms as well. And there's things, if you want to get metaphysical, open to mystery, we don't know everything, but we are still wearing animal bodies, whatever your philosophical or religious beliefs are. And it's interesting that these same people who out of one side of their mouth are saying they don't believe in determinism. You got all of this indoctrination about the genetic side, but also are sizing you up almost like it's this Hollywood casting agency about how you look and how you sound and your whole vibe. No matter how these people deny it, nature comes back and shows you that it is the truth in the end. Even when they deny it, it's popping back up. It's right there, apparent. They don't even see it.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, if you just take a look at a newscast for the CBC, you just look at the characters that are on air. For the most part, I'm speaking in general terms. You're like, wow, you're not attractive enough for TV. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not.
Revenge.
I worked in the television industry for 15 years. I mean, come on. Like, you look at Fox News and then you look at MSNBC.
Yeah.
You're seeing these two different types of women. I mean, Rachel Maddow versus Laura Ingraham or any woman that is on Fox News, right?
Yeah. Physiognomy. Physiognomy at work.
There's no denying it. There's a reason why Fox News has great ratings.
Well, hopefully, yeah. We'll leave that aside. But what about growing up in Canada? We know we had Ricardo Duchesne. I know you're aware of him as well. We love him. He was on for the second time last week. So we have a little Canada theme back to back. It was horrifying. It was horrifying to hear about what is going on there and the denial of its European roots. In school, did you get any positive education about the European stock that founded the country we call Canada, and that those are the roots? It's not just a landmass.
Again, like, I didn't get the overt anti-whiteness that is pervasive now in media and academia. I mean, there's no denying it. I didn't get it to that degree. I just really didn't get a thorough history. I could remember being really young, like being in elementary school, and actually getting legitimate history where they would talk about how the Europeans came and settled Canada, and it was French and English that did that. And then they would sign treaties with the natives, and, there was a war amongst the native tribes, and that they were savage at the time. This was, again, in the education that I received when I was young. And then that sort of tapered off in high school. I didn't really get that as much anymore. So, but again, like, I'm a little too old for the actual overt anti-whiteness that is now displayed in schools. I certainly would not want to send my child to any of these state-run schools or university, because I just feel like it's a total indoctrination center. I feel like you are really doing your child disservice sending them to these state-run schools, whether it be elementary or even university. You take conservative kids or kids of conservative parents, and then you send them to these schools, and then they come out totally programmed, and they have tattoos and pink hair, and they hate their parents. It's awful. I didn't have that. But, nothing surprises me nowadays with the lengths that they'll go to indoctrinate your kids. I'm surprised I didn't get indoctrinated. I sit here and I think about it a lot. I'm like, how come I didn't get it? Like, I don't understand. Like, it didn't work on me. It worked on me to a little degree in terms of, like, feminism, a little bit, but I was never like an overt feminist. I never identified as a feminist. I like the idea of having a career, which is why I had one. And I stayed too long in my career, and I waited too long to have children. So in that regard, I was indoctrinated a bit. But hating myself and hating my family and my ancestors and all of that, like, no.
It didn't work.
Yeah, this just really quickly. That's the thing is when we grow up, when we look back, anti-whiteism when we were young had a little bit of a different flavor than it does today. So if we juxtaposition the two, it's almost as though there was no anti-whiteism when we were young. But going all the way back, I was just talking about this the other night, that you have like the Andy Griffith Show. And I watched this black and white television show from 1960, I think is when it first aired. The whole show was based on the premise, and this is in the United States, that it is immoral to carry a firearm. It is immoral to have the right to self-defense, and that is something foundational to the tapestry of the United States.
I didn't even know that. I never watched reruns of the Andy Griffith Show. Wow.
Yes. So going all the way back, and it goes even further. But it's when we were younger, they had a lot of these mean, what we refer to as mean pathogens, these anti-white ideas that harm Western kind and Western civilization. One of the primary ones, our age and older, 20, even 40 years older than we are, was this one that it was the moral thing to do. You had to do this for all of these other peoples of the world. You had to bring them in to your civilization. You had to use them to replace you where you worked, where you lived, etc. Because it was the moral thing to do. Even the idea going back 50 years before that they used to even think, and they would teach at universities and they would teach at elementary schools, that non-white people were intellectually inferior and that therefore the white race had to take care of them. It was your moral and ethical obligation to take care. Nowadays, of course, you couldn't possibly teach anything like that. But you see, in both cases, it ended up in outcomes that were deleterious for Western kind and Western civilization. And now ultimately, we can see in Canada as well, to bring it back to the conversation, where Western civilization is deteriorating in Canada, and this is harmful for all of the Canadian citizens, irrespective of their race or origin.
Well, it is interesting that you're talking about that, because I do think that the propaganda was there even when I was young, but it was certainly more subtle than it is now, which is why I don't think it's working as well now, because it's too overt. So people are rejecting it. But when I was younger, what you said brings to a thought. They had a very famous ad in Canada. It's the I Am Canadian ad, and it was for Molson Canadian beer. And it was very popular when I was about in grade 9. So I was about 14 years old when it came out. And it's about a guy who stands on a stage and talks about like the benefits of diversity and inclusivity. And you're like, at the time, it was like a really cool ad and everybody talked about it. Like,
selling beer.
Yeah. And then I watched it again, like recently, and I went, wow, that is just unbelievable propaganda. And at the time, you don't really think about that, right? You're 14 years old. You're like watching, hey, that's a cool ad for beer. Not really kind of processing how much programming they're, attempting on you. And of course, you see this ad everywhere, right? It's not just commercials. Like the I Am Canadian guy was everywhere. He's in the liquor stores. His poster was everywhere. He was like a big deal. And looking back, you're like, wow, that was something.
Not that we take lightly the fact that there are children in school right now who are being told that they have this original sin that they can't get off of them and go home crying and traumatized. We've had shows focusing on that, and again, it's awful. But do you think, in a strange way, that it's so overt now that this is actually a good thing, that they're showing their hand and it's going to somehow turn around?
Absolutely. And I don't think that this is probably the first time that this has happened in the history. Of course, we don't know, because history is written by the winners, right? And the winners aren't always good people. So I think that we have seen this sort of indoctrination in the past. And I think that they have showed their hand too much. And I think that the vast majority of people have sort of fought against it. And I think we're going to see that again. I think history is going to repeat itself, even if we don't know that that's the history. I don't see any other way, because they're so obvious at this point. I mean, I just saw something about Nickelodeon with a transgender person, promoting Pride Month and loving yourself. This is Nickelodeon. I mean, you know, this is really overt. There's no hiding this at this point in time. I mean, if you're a parent and you're even watching just a little bit of what your child is watching, you're going to go, this is weird. Why are they showing this? You know?
Yeah, they're now getting into, and maybe you could speak to this for a moment too, the instincts of a parent and that protect your child at all costs instinct. That, you know, that there's few forces in the world that are more powerful than that. Now that they're triggering that, I'd imagine we're going to see much more of a pushback and many more people waking up.
Definitely. And I think that that is also permeates into the COVID-19 vaccine as well. So you're seeing a lot of protective parents coming out of the woodwork going, well, my child does not need to have a vaccine, an experimental mRNA, right? And I think that it's all connected, certainly. But yeah, even for me as a parent, my biggest stressor, my children are very young, but my biggest stressor is media consumption. I'm very concerned. This is something you cannot get away from it. Even if you say, okay, well, I'm going to limit the amount of time my child watches television, or I'm not going to let my kid watch TV at all. This is not realistic. They are going to watch it. And they're going to learn some things from it too, like healthy things. I mean, you know, I have to vet everything that my son watches on TV. I watch everything ahead of time. I make sure that he's only watching certain programs. But, you know, even that is going to, you know, you watch one program, then you want to watch another program. I mean, it's building blocks, right, to where they want to get you. And it's very tough to compete with media. So you have to teach your children from a young age what isn't good and what is. It's a constant stressor for me personally.
I know people will ask, can you share anything you and your husband are kind of planning as your boys grow, how you're going to do this, or make sure that they understand where they come from and have a healthy understanding of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we're already doing that for sure. I mean, we're already talking to, well, at least my one son. My other guy is only 7 weeks, but my 3-year-old, we're already talking to him about certain things, about his ancestors and how to be proud of yourself, and that you have the blood of heroes. And these things are very important that he knows this. I think he's going to be very strong. I don't worry too much, because he also, like, a lot of times you have a relationship that's broken between the mother and the father, because the father is going to be the conservative figure and the one, you know, pushing the child to not hate themselves, whereas the mother is more liberal, and the mother will allow their child to be subjected to certain things that the father will not.
Have you've observed that pattern with peers?
I'm sorry?
Have you observed that pattern in general with peers?
Yes, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously this creates a discord in the marriage as well. But there's a lot of men that are conservative that are married to liberal women. We saw that during the election of Donald Trump, where you would see the husband was going to vote for Trump, and then the wife was going to vote for Hillary Clinton, and then the wife would get the husband to vote for Hillary Clinton, right? This permeates into how you're raising your children as well. Because if one spouse is open to this progressivism, it's going to be, you know, it's now within the household, right? So it's going to be hard to sort of lock that down, because if one person believes in progressivism and they want to teach their children, like for instance, they want to go to the bookstore and get you know, a racism, an anti-racism book, and bring it into the house and read it to their 3-year-old, you know, that's going to happen. So in my case, because I'm not like that, it's going to be really difficult, I think, for my son to hate himself on any level. I just don't see it happening. They'll start going down that road, and I'll be like, what are you talking about? That's insane. Stop it. That's, you know, I'm tough. I'm tough, like with my child already. My husband is like, don't be so tough on him. He's only 3. And I'm like, it's a tough world. He needs to learn.
Nice. He'll be here. He'll be up here with us soon, doing this, advocating, being a little activist.
So this is the problem. This is another issue, though, that I run into, because some of the things that you want to teach them, you can't, because they don't understand the nuance of it. right? So if they go into a group of friends and then they repeat certain things and then their parents catch wind of it, it can be a problem, right?
Yeah.
And they can only understand so much. So that's why I say, you just talk to them about, like I said, your ancestors are heroes. They built this country. My family in particular, actually my husband's family too, have been in Canada for like 12 plus generations. Like my family built Quebec City, like they built it. And it's the oldest city in North America. So, and my husband's side is Empire Loyalists. They came here and they fought on behalf of the Queen. And so they've been here for generations as well. So, we tell our son this, he knows, he already is aware of his history, which I think is really important.
That's cool. Your ancestors helped build Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
Quebec. It's for anyone that doesn't know, I haven't been there. I've heard great things. I have been to Toronto, but I've heard it's arguably the most European city in North America in terms of its architecture and feel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We do want to talk about Ontario and the lockdowns, but before we get to that, there's something that you'd said too. I know you mentioned Donald Trump was kind of the tipping point for you. You came out more with your views, but we always like to hear about that moment when you're realizing more dots are connecting. Was it all there already? And then when Trump was popular, gaining momentum in the campaign, you just said, screw it, you're going to talk openly about it? Or were there things going on in the world, Trump campaign or otherwise, that I guess all funneled into more of an awakening for you? Was like more things clicking? I guess what people call their red pill story.
Yeah. For me, it was probably when I was working as a reporter, weather person in a town called Sudbury, which is very far north. And the whole Michael Brown shooting happened. And I remember, you have to understand, in Canada, CNN is a big deal. So the ratings of CNN in Canada are big. Every news station has CNN playing. They don't have Fox News playing. Don't get me wrong, Fox News, I don't think it's exactly conservative, but in Canada, if you don't watch it, you've been brainwashed to think that it's like evil. So Fox News isn't even played in the newsroom, okay? So everything is happening on CNN about the Michael Brown shooting. So everybody kind of takes that as like, that's total truth. And so I could remember watching it in the newsroom. And then, I just kind of had some questions about the whole thing. Like, I thought, why would the police just shoot him? Like, it just doesn't make sense because my dad was a police officer and I grew up in a police family. So for me, I was like, none of this really makes sense. I've had a lot of exposure to police officers in my life and it's odd. So then I would start reading, Daily Wire or National Review. And I would be like, oh, well, here are some tidbits of information that CNN's not telling us, like the criminal history of Michael Brown or what happened in the convenience store prior to the shooting. And so now I suddenly have the entire story and I'm going, okay, well, this shooting is justified because this person is doing things that would justify this shooting. They are acting, their behavior is criminal. What they're doing is bad. And so as soon as you go down that path, I'm like, or road rather, it changes you. And now suddenly I'm looking through everything through a different lens. I'm reading American conservative publications and I'm going, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. I understand this. I get it now. And then with the Donald Trump thing, that was really interesting because my husband and I were real estate investors and I was red pilled on money, like the Federal Reserve and the financial sector when I was younger. So I always kind of saw things through the lens of money. And so I understood how evil the Federal Reserve was. And so for me, we were real estate investors and I was always a fan of Donald Trump, always, because Donald Trump was a very inspirational figure. He did a lot of motivational books and videos that I used to listen to. And he was a great guy. Hollywood loved him. Hollywood loved that guy until he ran as a Republican. And everything changed. As soon as he decided to throw his name into the presidential run, he was suddenly vilified because he was running as a Republican. And I remember being like in the newsroom and people were like, he's a racist and he's that. And I was like, well, he was only a racist when he started running as a Republican. Prior to that, Hollywood loved him. They put him in tons of movies and he was in rap songs. I mean, this guy was a really popular guy. And now suddenly he's evil because he's a Republican. So right away, you know.
And speaking about things that were somewhat taboo or overtly taboo at that point. And yeah, we've spoken to different people and have different ideas about what really went on there. And, you know, was he truly an outlier? Was he truly a black swan event who failed? Or was it just a more complex thing? Because even as you said, if Hollywood loved him, what does that say about his beginnings? But no matter what, I don't want to get into all that necessarily. And I don't have, I keep an open mind about it. I don't even say that I have a very strong opinion one side or the other. History will see, and we can already see in this, not that we are too many years out of his presidency, that his mere presence and what he talked about brought things to the surface that needed to be brought to the surface and people needed to talk about and be aware of. Primary among them, of course, mass immigration, and people realizing more and more that it's used as a weapon, as we spoke about in great detail with Ricardo last week. Why don't we get into a little bit of the Ontario lockdown?
Because you mentioned something very important.
Sure.
Donald Trump, in my opinion, won on the immigration platform. He won on curbing immigration and building the wall. And he took that information from Ann Coulter's Adios America. He basically took that book and it became the playbook for his presidential run. She got that information from Patrick Buchanan, right? Suicide of a Superpower.
Yep.
And the paleo-conservative movement basically became Trump's campaign, and that's how he won. This year, or when he lost the election, a lot of it, in my opinion, had to do with the fact that he did not talk about immigration, curbing immigration anymore. It was not part of the campaign. And I blame Jared Kushner.
Do you have any thoughts as to why? Do you have any thoughts as to why that was, that he backed down on the rhetoric? No matter, again, not related to what actually happened on election day, but he wasn't talking about it on the campaign trail as much. That is true.
Yeah, I think that his advisor, Jared Kushner, was not for that plan. I think Jared Kushner is a liberal Democrat. I think he's a globalist. And unfortunately for Trump, he surrounded himself with vipers, and they sort of were able to tap down his fantastic instincts. And I think that unfortunately for him, his daughter was also a huge problem because she's married. She's a globalist too. And I think that they were both very self-serving. And I think that they didn't care about the immigration issue at all. I think that they didn't want him to talk about it. And I think because of that, he didn't. I think they had that much sway with him within the White House. I think that most policy decisions came down to Jared Kushner deciding. I mean, even when he became president, he kicked out all of the, pro-Trump nationalists. He kicked them all out of the White House. And suddenly all the people that helped him win, he didn't have them surrounding him anymore. He was suddenly surrounded by all of these, neoliberal globalists. So I think that he had bad instincts in terms of who he allowed to surround him in the White House. And I think that that was the fall of his presidency in many cases. I don't want to get into the, whether or not, the presidential run was completely fabricated in the sense that, that, because that's a whole different thing. But let's just say, I don't think it was legit, but.
Well, we like to remind people to, as you mentioned, trust Canada's favorite news network, CNN. Maybe, I wonder if they call it Canada News Network up there. It's that kind of thing where it's in every single hotel lobby and airport. It's always CNN.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah. Well, listen to them about the election.
Yeah, they know better for sure. I mean, they're experts, right?
Yeah, clearly. You've been vocal about the lockdowns, and you're putting in your province of Ontario, you're promoting it as, you're putting it up there in the contest, this great contest that no one wants to win, as the most draconian lockdown measures in the world. So we definitely know it's at least in the running.
Mhm.
And you might be able to make the case here on the show today that is the worst place. But tell us about that, what you're experiencing and seeing there, and what people are not allowed to do, and the general mood, if there's any pushback on it, or if everyone's just going along with it.
Mm. Okay, so it's June and we're still in a lockdown. There is no haircuts, okay? For
Oh, wow.
288 days, I think in the city of Toronto, you have not been able to get your hair cut. I live 2 hours outside of the city. Up here, masks are mandated. I have to line up to go into a grocery store. In the freezing cold, I was pregnant with a toddler, still lining up to get into a grocery store. If you do not wear your mask, okay, you will not be able to shop in stores. It's June, okay? We cannot buy certain items. Certain items are seen as non-essential, therefore you cannot buy them. For example, children's clothing is considered non-essential. So if I go to Walmart and want to buy my toddler shoes, you have murder tape has cordoned off the section for children's shoes. I cannot buy my child pajamas. At one time, I could not buy my child diapers. I complained directly to Walmart, and lo and behold, the next, I think a couple of days later, they suddenly opened it up so you could buy diapers. And I was like, I think that was me. I think I'm the one that convinced them, because I bitched so hard on Twitter about it. And let's see, you cannot eat at a restaurant. Everything is takeout only. 70% of people that worked in the restaurant industry are now unemployed. It is so bad here, okay? Not only that, let's talk about the quarantine, because that's my favorite part. So I spent 3 months in Florida this winter because I got the hell out of this shithole. And so, sorry, you gotta censor me. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
You get one. You got one mulligan.
I'm sorry. I have like the mouth of a sailor. This is so difficult for me not to swear. So anyways, I went to Florida for 3 months and then we came back. So we had to get a negative COVID test to return into the country, okay? That wasn't enough. You then have to quarantine for 14 days. You then at the border are given 2 COVID tests that you are to take at your house on day 1 of return and day 14. If those tests become positive or you do not get them in time, you have to quarantine for another 14 days, even though you've already come into the country with a negative COVID test. Okay.
And what does quarantine mean exactly? You can't leave your house at all?
That's right. You can't leave your house. And guess what? The cops came to our house. They came to our house. They came to our door and they said, so you're following the rules? Okay, good. We want to make sure that, you're here and that you're actually quarantining and that you're not leaving the house.
They checked in on you. They checked in on you.
Yeah, they checked in on us. 30 times they called. Okay. 30, more than that actually, because I didn't give them my phone number. They had my husband's phone number and I'm pregnant and I'm dealing with a toddler in a house we have nothing to do. It's March, so there's snow. It's awful. And so I'm not answering, they called him to get to me. And then they have robocalls. One of the first calls that we got was asking if we were getting fresh air. They said, how are you getting fresh air? And my husband goes, we're not. And it's true, we weren't.
Open the windows.
Yep. So this is how bad it is here.
So with restaurants, there's no chance for socializing. There's nothing. No, people aren't socializing at all.
If you're following the government rules, which most people in Ontario are, but because I already had COVID is real. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, COVID is a flu virus, okay? Like, it's just gone like crazy power and control with the government here in particular with COVID. I had it. It was a 2-week bad flu. And I had it when I was pregnant. So, I certainly can attest to it. And I can say, yeah, I had COVID. Am I scared to get COVID? No, I wanted to get it. I wanted to get it so I could tell people that I got over it, because I was like, the survival rate is so high that I know I'm not going to die from it. Like, I really, it's like a flu, and I trust my God-given immune system. So anyways, You also here in the province of Ontario, actually the entire country because it's federal, so Justin Trudeau brought it in, you have to stay at a government-sanctioned quarantine hotel at a cost which he just upped to $5,000 a person if you take a flight back into the country, and that includes Canadian citizens. So it's not just international people. You have to go into a quarantine hotel. By the way, multiple women have now reported sexual assaults in the government-controlled prison hotels.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this is what we're living with.
Just to clarify, so when you went to Florida in the winter, this was not in action yet. So
No.
you were able to go to your home, or did you have to stay in one of these hotels?
No, because, okay, so this is quite the story. We wanted to bring our vehicle to Florida because we knew that we were staying for a prolonged period of time. So we need our car, right? Because renting a car in Florida for 3 months is really expensive. And we have a car seat, right, for our son. So this is what we did. We took a helicopter service, okay, to get us from like where we were in Niagara over the border into Buffalo. This is a 15-minute helicopter. They shipped our car. Okay, we got our car, we picked it up at the border, and we drove it to Florida. Because we were crossing at a land border on the way home, we did not have to stay in the quarantine hotels. So that is the loophole that now every Canadian is doing. They're going overseas, and then they're flying into Buffalo, okay, if they live in Toronto or Ontario, and they're literally walking across the border. Because you don't
for anyone that doesn't know it, so it's just to give a geography lesson, it's Buffalo in the state of New York at Niagara Falls, right across from border into Canada. Buffalo must be hopping right now.
It is.
That must be the place where all the Canadians are they maybe hang out and wait to walk back into Canada. But if you or your husband or family member had business, or maybe, I don't know, you have family or friend elsewhere in another country and you needed to see them, or there was a death in the family, whatever. If you fly to another country, you fly back into Canada, you're a Canadian citizen, you're mandated to pay out of your own pocket to stay at a quarantine hotel.
Mm-hmm. Can you believe this?
No.
No. Like,
I mean,
zero rights. It's
wow.
Unbelievable. I mean, I knew our charter was worth nothing to begin with. But I mean, now it's so apparent that the charter is meaningless. We don't have rights, actually. We have privileges as Canadians. We don't have inalienable rights. We have privileges, and they can be revoked at any time. So clearly during COVID, they've been totally revoked. We have no rights. They're just like, flying to the country. By the way, Canadian citizen flying into the country is treated the exact same as a foreigner flying into the country. You both have to go to a quarantine hotel. You're like, well, what's the point of being Canadian? I don't get it.
Wow. Now, remembering we're on YouTube, and of course, YouTube and CNN have the final word on all this. What is the vaccine situation like? And I know you've started a new life. You have your beautiful family. You're outside of the city, but any way that you're able to kind of keep your finger on the pulse, whether it be through the media or through people what are people's perceptions of the vaccine?
Okay, so Ontario is very different than the rest of the country, I would say. I mean, listen, Canada is very socialist to begin with. You do have some conservative provinces. I mean, you have Alberta and you have Saskatchewan, and you have the interior of British Columbia, which is pretty conservative. But I mean, Ontario is a very special place in that the majority of people here are brainwashed. And so everybody wants the vaccine, as far as I know. So say you have 14 million people living in the province, I would say you have less than 500,000 who are like me, maybe less. So most people are very excited to get their vaccine. Most people are lining up to get their second dose of the vaccine. Even now, the government has said you can mix and match vaccines, by the way, because we know how healthy that is, right?
Sounds great.
Yeah, and Canada promoted the AstraZeneca vaccine when 15 to 20 countries across Europe were banning it because of the blood clot issue. And now they're still giving it to people. I knew a guy who got the AstraZeneca vaccine and he had such breathing problems. He was gonna call 911 because he couldn't breathe. He had COVID, by the way, and then he got the vaccine. And I said, well, why would you get that? You had COVID. It's like, well, my doctor said I should get it. And then I was like, well, what about the side effects you suffered? Are you going to get your second vaccine? And he was like, yes, that means it's working.
I do have to, let me read quickly from,
Mhm.
Let's see, I think it's CNN is reporting this.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can actually, we can say this with, it's certainly the case. CNN says, CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization finds a higher number of observed than expected myocarditis, pericarditis, heart inflammation cases in 16 to 24-year-olds 30 days after receiving either the Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. So that's from CNN is even reporting this right now about reactions. And this is a swelling of the sac that the heart sits in with fluid, which kills you and becomes a lifelong problem that you have to deal with to survive, eventually needing if infections continue, you need a heart transplant. Not exactly an easy thing to come by.
Yeah, I was reading about that in Israel. They were having this problem, which is why I think that they have outlawed the AstraZeneca vaccine now. And also, sorry, I didn't hear if you mentioned it, but I think that they're seeing that inflammation, that heart inflammation with 12 to 15-year-olds who have gotten the vaccine.
Oh, man.
It's really scary. Certainly vaccines can be good. I will not be getting an experimental mRNA. That's not happening. My children will not be getting it. So if it means I can never travel again, then that's what it means. I'm not doing that. I'm really scared of it, to be honest. Like, that's the truth. I'm scared of the long-term effects, which we have no safety trials or studies for. I'm also scared for fertility. That's a conspiracy theory, the fertility stuff. So, you know, even CNN says that's a conspiracy theory. So we don't want to talk about that. But certainly, if I don't know the long-term effects, how can I not make the assumption that it could maybe affect my fertility long-term? I don't know. Right?
Of course. Of course.
So everyone I know is really excited about the vaccine, except for me and my family, my immediate family. I know that they're putting pressure, the Americans in particular are putting pressure on the Canadian government to open the border for land travel. And I think that the Canadian government is taking their time because they want to implement some version of a vaccine passport. So the rumor around town is that they will allow you to not do the quarantine if you are fully vaccinated. So that 14-day quarantine that I was talking about that everybody has been subjected to, I think if you're fully vaccinated, they're not going to make you do that. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to do it. I'll have to do the quarantine if I travel to Florida and try to come back.
I was going to say, you have any family in the States?
No, I don't. Well, I do. I have like extended family that I don't really know. They got out of Canada a long time ago. What do you call a smart Canadian? An American.
An American. Very good.
It's not like things are great here all around, but in terms of COVID, that's insane. I mean, where I am, it's different in different parts of the States, but where I am, restaurants were never fully closed. They had this ridiculous thing you probably heard about where you had to walk in with a mask on and then sit down as if that's somehow okay. Like the virus only is at adult mouth level, but not when you're sitting down. I don't know how that really works, but science, science.
Yeah.
But no, nothing like this. Nothing like this.
Well, and it was really hard for me to kind of comprehend because I spent 3 months in Florida where it was essentially free. I mean, the county I was in was a little bit crazy about the mask mandates. They really were. They were enforcing them quite a bit, especially when I was going to doctor's appointments. They were really, really dumb about it. Like, I'm a pregnant woman. at the clinic to see the doctor, and they wouldn't even open up the waiting room. So I can't sit down. I have to wait in a lineup to go into the doctor's office. My husband's not allowed to come with me. That was really hard. I have to say, like, the vast majority of my pregnancy was awful, and it was kind of ruined because of COVID protocols. My husband was not allowed to come with me to any appointment. It was awful. Jeez. And that was also in the US. So, that was not perfect either, but you kind of put up with it because everything is at least open in Florida, right? You can have a life. You can do things with your children. Like, I can't even take him to a play gym here. I can't take him. Supposedly the zoo is opening like in 2 weeks or something, but you have to wear a mask. Toddlers 2 and up have to wear masks, and that's not happening. No. We had some of that stupidness in Florida too, like where they would say, okay, your kid's 2, he has to wear a mask. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So good luck getting a 2-year-old little boy to wear a mask.
Well, yeah, we saw that footage on the airplane of one of these cases where the 2-year-old or 3-year-old wouldn't keep the mask on, and they actually threw the parents off of the plane. I hope they sue the hell out of the airline and somehow are successful. This has been folks, we have a hard out with Jill because she does have a very young family. It's been a magnificent time with you, sweet woman. It's interesting because the Canadians worldwide are very often viewed or seen in a whole, indefinitely, incorrectly, and proven here today as a sort of a docile and obedient to tyranny population. But what we have seen today is a perspicacious and puissant woman, to say the least. She's not going to put up with anything in Canada or the US or anywhere else. And we are so very glad about that. Now, we do have 2 quick financial gifts with a question for you, Jill. Okay. The first is from, both of these are actually from the great Eminent Rain, a magnificent musician and a professional musician. First is $5 financial gift. Thank you, dear brother. And he writes, Promethean hails so hard. His trademark saying, Prometheus Rising, Take Back Your Destiny is a book that I wrote, Jill. Eminent Rain with another financial gift, $9. Thank you so much. And he says for Jill, I need to know more about these loopholes getting in and out of Canada. Please, Promethean hails so hard. Anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, all you have to do is you take a negative COVID test, because they won't let you in without a PCR test of some kind. We paid $200 US for ours because I refused to get the nasal swab. I'm not allowing that at all. So I did a saliva test because, by the way, they don't do that here in Canada. They won't do the saliva test because we're the best healthcare system in the world, right? We don't even do saliva tests. So I have to get your PCR negative test. You show it at the border. You cross at the land borders. You can take a flight out of the country. Like if you're in Canada, take a flight out, but make sure wherever your destination is, say it's Toronto, you would fly into Buffalo, and then you would take a cab to the border and literally walk across. That's what you do. Because that's where the loophole is. They're not making you stay in a quarantine hotel. Of course, some people have exemptions, like if you're a government official, if you're Justin Trudeau, do you think you're staying in a quarantine hotel? No. But if you're just a traveler who wants to go to Mexico for a week, you're evil and you're bringing in COVID, right? So you have to go through all these loopholes and pay potentially $5,000 a person to stay in a hotel. It's outrageous. So that's what you need to do. You need to fly into the Buffalo airport and you need to walk across because they're doing it. I did it. We didn't walk across. We took our car because we had shipped it. Mm-hmm. That's the loophole. They're trying to close it, by the way. CBC is doing stories on it nonstop. Oh, snowbirds are still managing to get into the country without doing the quarantine hotel. But, there's so few people that are doing that I don't think they
Yeah, and I'm sure that if these were what we like to refer to as border crossers, astronauts in waiting or neurosurgeons or something of this nature, immigrating to our country. Yes, precisely. If they enter, I'm sure the taxpayers in Canada, shouldered primarily by the founding stock of that country, are going to be paying their $5,000 a person to sit around in a hotel and of course, I'm sure read Blake and other poetry to the wonderful Canadians who are trapped in those prisons with them for 2 weeks. But Jill, it has been marvelous to have you. We know that we know that we got to let you go. So please let folks know one more time who you are, where they can find you, and any final thoughts you have.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm really active there because I haven't really had the time to do so many YouTube videos, and they're not really censoring me that hard on Twitter. So it's at Jill Colton Free. I do have a YouTube channel, Jill Colton. And parting thoughts, I really just hope that America invades Canada.
I don't know about that. You might want some changes. You might want some changes in America.
We're only hope for freedom, guys. No, I get it. I get the problems in the USA. I understand them completely. But I'm telling you, if you come here for even a week, you'll be like, please just get me back to the USA immediately.
Yeah, I can't say it's top of my travel list right now, especially after today's conversation. But I'll light a candle for you and say a prayer, and hopefully next time we talk, we'll have some better news about that. But we greatly thank you for your time, Jill, and all the best here. Thank you to your husband. Tell him thank you for holding down the fort while you were on air, and all blessings to your family. And please stay in touch. A couple days, we'll have this posted on our site, theafterparty.tv. We'll have your links. We always include guest links, and there'll be more to come. Jason.
Oh, yeah. Thank you to everybody. Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you to everybody who, I guess, Imminent Rain, financially gifted, everybody who participated in the conversation today. It's always wonderful to have everybody here with us on tap. And we're absolutely, Jill, I really enjoyed you. We're going to have you back 100% if you'll come back. You were fantastic. Thank you so much for being one of our greatest champions up there in the cold, white north, which we hope stays white. And of course, we're talking about snow. We'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye, folks.